that we started. Okay, and so sorry if I'm looking right side, but my laptop is here and my monitor is here, so that's why I will sit into my original position just in a bit, just in a second. Okay, let me open up my stream as well. Okay, and we are live. Okay, let me sit in my original position. Oh. Okay, so guys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, please let me know if the quality, the voice is good. There is no lag, since I had some problems during my past dev live shows in the past days with connection. So please let me know. Hölgyek, urak, kérlek szépen titeket infózzatok, hogy mi a helyzet, hogy jó-e, nincs-e lag. Jó, és akkor kezdünk utána. Please let me know, guys and girls in the stream. And if everything is right, then we can start after that. Nem laggol, Áron. Egyáltalán nem laggol. Oksa. Nem laggol, jó. És lehet hallani engem is. It's fine, no lag. Okay, thank you. You guys and girls in the stream also can hear us. Would you please say something for voice check, just to make sure? Can you hear me, David? Oh, you can.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, nice. Petya, köszönöm szépen 46-at. Oksa. Akkor nem laggol, ugye? There is no lag. Okay, they're saying there is no lag and they can hear us well. Okay, I'm good to start. Let me know when you're down. Let me know.
Okay, I just entered the Twitch.
Oh, nice. Okay.
I just don't want to look at the video there. It's too distracting.
Okay, nice. So you will see the questions as well. Yeah. Okay. Let me know if we can start. Let me know.
I'm ready to go.
Nice. Thank you. Okay. So welcome everyone in this newest episode of my Dev Live show. I'm Remulto and I'm joined today with an awesome and famous guest who is a developer of our beloved childhood games, David Fox. Thank you for accepting my request for this video interview of mine. I'm also very honored to be with you here today. And yeah, like I'm always saying, let's start with a little bit of introduction. So please introduce yourself for those who might not know who you are.
Okay. I'm David Fox. Okay. I'm still consider myself a game developer. I started back in the mid 1970s,
okay,
which is an ancient history. My wife and I knew that I wanted to do something with interactive games, and actually was really interested in doing something with like theme parks.
Okay.
Interactive theme. I was thinking of like an interactive Disneyland. So I figured I had to start somewhere, and my wife and I opened a public access nonprofit computer center in 1977. Same year that the Apple II came out, and actually the same year that Star Wars came out also. And a few years later, I heard, since we lived in Marin County, which is where Lucasfilm was based, I heard about that they were starting a new games group, and quickly contacted them, since I had already met the people in the computer division when I was working on my computer animation primer book the year before, and got an interview and got hired. So I was the third employee for Lucasfilm Games, which became LucasArts.
Okay.
So I was there for 10 years. Well, I was at Lucasfilm for 10 years. I was in LucasArts for 8 years. In the last 2 years, I was doing a location-based entertainment project. And most of the games I worked on were adventure games. And so I was there at the beginning working with Ron Gilbert and working on Maniac Mansion and Zack McCracken was my game, and then Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and Labyrinth was the first one I worked on, which was kind of a precursor to the kinds of point and click adventure games he would do.
I see.
And then more recently, did a game based on Rube Goldberg's Chain Reaction Machines 10 years ago, and then Thimbleweed Park and Return to Monkey Island.
Okay.
That's my shirt.
Nice. You dressed up for us. Thank you for that.
I did.
Nice. Okay, so you mentioned
And
Disneyland. Have you
so
been to
that's
Disneyland?
the
Oh,
brief
sorry.
history. Save it.
No,
Yeah, that was just my brief.
I see. Thank you for that. So you mentioned, by the way, Disneyland. So have you been to Disneyland before you started making games? Like you said, you mentioned that you would like to
Yeah.
make interactive Disneylands.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Los Angeles,
Okay.
and I lived there for the first 20 years of my life.
Okay.
And Disneyland wasn't that far. So
Okay.
I remember watching a television show when I was a kid of Walt Disney promoting and talking about his dream in Disneyland. And so I'm sure we went pretty soon after it opened,
I see.
maybe after the crowds passed, and went there multiple times. We were going there for a high school thing also, where the park was closed to just a bunch of schools, and was always fascinated by that level. But I always felt that there's this funny thing. Before I go, I'd be really excited about going, and I'd go on the ride and realize it was exactly the same as it was last time. And I always feel a little sad afterwards that nothing had changed, and that it would just didn't live up to my memories after I would do it again. And that, so it kind of came from that, like, it needs to change. And, of course, the tech wasn't there to do that for a long time. But now they're doing it to some degree. There was a book series called Dream Park in the early 80s that kind of talked about interactive theme parks also, which is really cool. Larry Niven and Stephen Barnes were the authors of the first one.
Okay. And so what were your favorite rides and exhibitions at Disneyland?
Well, I remember, it's funny. I mean, the when I was really young, there was the trip to the moon was where you get into this big rocket ship out in front, and you walk into, and you end up in this circular theater, kind of stacked, and you look down in the center, you'd see a round screen down below and another round screen up above, and those were supposed to be the camera views up in front of it, behind your ship. And we launched, and all the seats were shaking as you launch, and we end up going into orbit. I think we might have circled the moon and came back down, which is pretty good for a 15-minute or 10-minute ride to go that fast. But that was fascinating as a kid. The House of Tomorrow, they had something called the Monsanto House of Tomorrow, which was a futuristic home that kind of looked like a pod, and it was all electric, and they had video phones. This is like in the early 1960s, so they had video phones and things that we're doing right now, which is no big deal. But back then it was like, oh, you could actually see the person you're talking to. I guess it was, their idea of how the future would be. So always fascinated with their predictions of where things would go. Carousel of Progress. Those aren't really attractions, or more educational in some way, or give you an idea. I was never huge on the high speed rides that much. I didn't care for the Space Mountain. It was just being thrown around in the dark was not my idea of fun. Not being able to brace myself.
I see.
But the ones that I haven't gone back since. I think around the time that we had COVID was when they opened up the Star Wars area, and I haven't been back since then up here. So I'm looking forward to going back down and spending some time and doing all the new stuff that's there that hasn't been there since I was there last.
I see. Okay, nice. Thank you for that.
I got to work on a Disney attraction. in in 2007, I think it was,
Okay.
or maybe it was 2012. My wife and I were Jonathan Ackley, who did one of the Monkey Island games,
Okay.
ended up working for Disney for like 20 years, and he invited myself and my wife Annie, who's also done graphic adventure games, to help design some overlay games in some of the theme parks in Asia. So Hong Kong Disneyland and Tokyo Disney Sea.
Nice.
And one of the things we designed actually got built at Tokyo Disney Sea in the fortress. So that was kind of like a fulfillment of a childhood dream to
Yeah, that's what I
actually.
wanted to say. That you get boring by having those same attractions, but at least you got the chance to design them, right? So you got back to
Yeah, well,
that.
it was like an overlay game, so it wasn't really a ride. It was like a kind of a treasure
I
hunt
see.
inside this amazing space called the
Okay.
Fortress.
I see. Okay. So you were talking about Disneyland exhibitions being like educational. Do you believe that around those times games could be more educational than nowadays? And what do you think could be the case that games have lost their intention to be educational and people are not having the knowledge to build games or not promoting games to be educational?
Yeah, well, I think I've always had the idea that games could be enriching in some way,
Okay.
even if it wasn't educational in terms of like teaching you math or something. I'm talking
Yeah,
more
like having a
about,
message, a strict message.
yeah.
Yeah,
So like socially aware in a way where you might feel like you've learned something about yourself or about
true,
people,
true,
or something your point of view has been transformed. A good movie could do that.
true.
Games can do that. And you know the idea of like going to a movie and being on a ride, and after the movie's over you kind of forget about it 2 days later because there really wasn't any. It was, we call it cotton candy movie,
True.
or empty calories, or because there it was fun while it lasted, but it didn't impact your life in any way. And my favorite movies are movies that emotionally changed me and moved me in some way. And where I think about them, and what I think about is the feeling I had afterwards. That wow, that was amazing. Something opened up in my mind about where what's possible, or what's possible for myself.
Okay.
So yes, and that was my original goal when I was first thinking was, can we do games that um, help people be better people,
True, true.
essentially.
I totally
Um,
agree with you on that. Yeah, that's important for me
yeah,
too. And so, do you believe that um, people, the consumers of these projects, not just games but movies and comic books, music, they can totally feel the message that the developers or the authors or the makers of these movies, games, etc., have and give to them? So can
yeah,
they relate and can they feel their own stories? Can they relate to their own stories? Do you think?
yeah. I think it's possible. I
Okay.
don't know that how successful I've been in doing that. I mean,
Okay.
when I hear people say that they've played one of the games and it inspired them to do something, then I feel like I've accomplished it. Having a good time is one thing, but I talked to someone who ended up who played Zach McCracken and ended up becoming an archaeologist,
Nice. Okay.
and felt like that was, they felt like they could trace that back to their experience playing the game. Or someone else who ended up working in Germany on the new space telescope that went up. What's it called? Not Hubble, but the other one, the new one. And he worked on a component and felt like he could directly trace his idea of being able to see the stars or whatever by as a kid playing that game. And it's like,
Nice.
wow. So he actually felt like, I mean, he thanked me as an adult, that he said, this, you are partially responsible for my working here. So things like that are make my day when I hear that. When I hear people say that I loved your game, it was really fun, that's nice too. But when I actually hear that it was life changing in some way, or that inspired them to become a game programmer or game designer, they want to do their own. That's very cool.
It's very nice to hear from you, by the way, because I'm always appreciating people who are loving their childhood and who are always trying to change the world for the better. And it's always nice to see people like you who are making these games and have an
Thank you.
intention to change the world, because I feel like we need to really change the world. But of course, a lot of people are just telling, for people like me or you, that okay, you're naive, like being an adult, you should realize that one person cannot change a world. But we can, and I totally appreciate your work
Yeah,
and you saying
I
that.
think
And
it's possible.
yeah.
There's, I feel like that's always been a part of my focus through life,
Okay.
is to make a difference,
How you develop
to
that?
do.
How you develop that attitude over the time?
Um,
What do you think was the influence behind that attitude of yours?
I'm I'm trying to think if it was part of my upbringing.
Okay.
I think there was part of that. My parents probably contributed some of that. They weren't really activists anyway, but
Okay.
I definitely was involved in stuff in high school, and then for sure in college became, I don't want to say radicalized, but definitely aware. I mean, there was a period when I was in college at UCLA when we shut down the campus, and there were, this is during protests to the Vietnam War and bombing of Cambodia,
Okay.
and I thought that they this I guess this would have been maybe 1969 in that period. There, the school actually did something brilliant at that time. They took the energy that the students had and redirected it by offering some new courses that directly talked about our areas of protest, and had us go out to the community and talk about the war and outreach, and just explain issues to people. And that was brilliant to take our enthusiasm and do it in a way which actually could educate other people.
I see.
So that's great.
I see. Okay. And so you're talking about also your parents. Do you believe that a good parentalhood and also loving parents can also influence that kind of attitude, that you want to give love to the people around you and to the
Yeah,
whole world and
I
to
think so.
okay.
Yeah, and there, I think the other part for me too is that we had in my family, there were a bunch of issues. My mother, getting personal, my mother was schizophrenic when I was a teen,
Okay.
and so I think that probably was the impetus for me, getting into psychology and learning about more about myself, and ended up getting a degree in humanistic psychology, which is more of a direct line with the Zach universe, in kind of like
I see.
humanistic stuff, new agey stuff, and paranormal, and things, classes like that were actually taught at the college I was going to. I moved to Sonoma State College, where they had a core curriculum on that. So anything that to do with you know alternate possible universes and alternate perceptions, and um, you know, talking to people or past life stuff, was something I was really interested in. So, anything in the new age category, kind of found its way into that game. It's probably why Zach is probably the most personal of the games I did, because it really, even though it's done as a comedy, there, and I'm definitely not proselytizing and trying to push people into that direction, but that was kind of the basis for it, and just having fun with that whole thing, and just saying, "Wow, this is a possibility," and this is, and just opening up people's, giving you the experience of doing kind of magical things, like the mind linking and the teleporting and things like that. Fantasies that I had probably as a kid. I should say that my parents either I don't know if my parents didn't let me or we didn't for whatever reason, but I never, we never owned comic books.
I see.
But I had a good friend who had stacks and stacks of comics. So whenever I went over to his house and did overnight, I'd be up until like 2 o'clock in the morning, going through all the comics I hadn't read since the last time I was there. And, so the whole superhero thing and magical powers and that everything, all that was always uh, definitely an area that I loved, in terms of movie stories and topics and book stories.
Okay, nice. And what do you think? Why a lot of people, just lose their skill of being creative and believe in these very interesting things that we were talking about now? That's why do you think adults get boring, if you could say so?
Yeah,
And most of
it's
them just lose their childhood very quick.
yeah, I don't think I ever lost mine.
Yeah, I know that you
I think
did not, but that's why I'm asking you that
yeah,
what
I'm
could be the
wondering
case behind
what
that.
would have caused me to lose it. I'm thinking it's just the realities of surviving. Ending up in a job which you don't maybe especially like, but you're doing because you have to work
But
to
do you
get
believe
money.
that they still are those kids in their inner self? They just scared to release it since they have this,
Maybe
boxed life.
yeah. Well, there's this message. Okay, you grow up, kind of thing. You have to grow up and be responsible.
Yeah,
Is kind of the assumption that at least I don't know how that is, to what degree that's the same in other countries, but that was definitely the message I would hear all the time here.
sure.
And I was kind of moving in that direction. And I think for me, at least, there is this um, push, kind of a common, I wouldn't say emotional push, but like a sense of what I need to do next. This is not right. I'm not feeling like this is what I should be doing. I need to make a change.
I see.
And so I think a lot of people hear that, but a lot of people don't want to take the risk of shaking things up in order to do that change. And I, was really fortunate to find my wife, to find Annie when we were relatively young, and both of us having a similar feeling about that, and kind of following our intuition, following our dream. And we both had times so we were working at a job and something changed where we're now doing it for the paycheck and not for the love of the job. And she was better at this than I was, being able to say, okay, I'm done with this. I can't do it. Even though it was good income, realizing that she's kind of finished with that part and she needs to do the next thing. And I've had that feeling too, like, okay, what do we need to do next? Okay, let's think about what feels right, and kind of it's, um, imagining like a compass inside your head pointing you in the right direction,
Yeah.
and no, that's not quite it. That's not quite. Yeah, that feels more, and kind of like guiding yourself into
Yeah.
that path that feels correct, and then going with it. And it could be risky. I mean, because you could be, you could do it on the side if you have time, or you could say, okay, I'm just going to stop this other thing, which I'm not really happy with, and just going to do a complete shift. And if you don't have the financial support or emotional support in your life to do it makes it, things are stacked against you. You just don't have
True.
freedom to make those choices often, or it feels like you don't.
Yeah, but
And
all these
it
people
could be
feel
like,
empty if they do not risk or do not take the
yeah,
first
well, I mean,
step,
it's the idea of thinking back on your life and looking at choice points where you could have done
True,
something
true. Yeah.
and chose not to, and the regret that comes from that. And um, that would definitely not be something I'd want to find at the end of my life. It's like, God, I wish I had done this when I
Yeah.
had that opportunity. And I'm super fortunate in that I feel like I've follow the right paths. And when I look back on the chain reaction of things, it feels super planned. Like I had this
Even if you
roadmap and I
might
was
not be
saying, no,
planning it, right?
yeah, well,
Just follow the
or maybe
compass,
I
like you
was.
said. Yeah.
Yeah, if I go back to the New Agey stuff, maybe there is some, Caponian or something who's, um, or not Caponian, Scalarian, or one of the other aliens who are feeding me thoughts
Yeah,
about
that's
what
what
I
I
should
wanted
be
to
doing
say.
now.
Or maybe your future vision is guiding you, right? So I believe in that.
Yeah,
I totally believe
yeah,
in different words and in aliens too, because I feel like that's also things that we forgot, like as an adult when we grow up. A lot of us, not me, not you, but a lot of us, and it's sad because like whenever I hear some news about, for example, UFOs or aliens, I'm so excited and so hyped, and I'm trying to discuss it with my close friends, and most of them are like, oh, okay, it's not true, it's not true, there are no other beings and other
mm,
people, future ones. So it's like so bad to see that people are these close-minded human beings in our world, and it's bad
yeah.
because like, yeah, I'm 30, but I still feel like a kid in myself, and I always believed that looking back to for or into our past and bringing it closer to us, and also having our childhood very well, very close to us, it will help us grow as a person in every direction.
Hmm.
So not just being able to love with honesty, but also to give love to people. And I feel like everyone could have more love in their life, and also being creative, that what should matter also as a kid. Like we used to believe in everything as a kid, right? Like you said. And and now
Yeah, I
most of
remember.
us just these close-minded people who are working 9 to 5, which of course is great for society and all these reasons and messages that we get as a growing up person. But yeah, okay. Do you think that there could be a change in the future as for this topic that we are discussing now?
Um, I hope that things move in that. I mean, it's harder to do this when you really are struggling to survive.
True, true.
It's hard. It's really hard if you really don't
Yeah,
have
but in the
the
if
funds.
if I mention the Bible, so the very first humans, Adam and Eve, had nothing, you know, and they were free because of that. If you
Yeah,
think
well,
of
I
that,
I see that. I see that as kind of allegory. Is like it's. I don't know that I believe that they were the first. I'm not very religious,
yeah,
so
me neither, me neither. I'm just saying that it's like it's a story that we can connect to.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Um, I wish there were. I mean, myths and mythology with you know the underdog, the hero who hasn't discovered he's a hero yet, to finding his path, which is essentially the Star Wars story with
true.
Luke Skywalker. I'd say Harry Potter, or that whole thing where you're following someone developing abilities and then using them to do good is our archetype, which I love. I'm
Yeah,
a sucker for that kind of a story. My wife has published her first novel in February, and we've been helping her a lot with the publication process and then social media and marketing, and supporting her in her next book that she's working on, which actually deals with aliens.
nice.
Um, it's more of a science fiction than the first one was,
Okay.
and the um, the idea that um, you're free to create, and help me. So I feel like right now it's my turn to help her, support her to create what she's working on.
That's very
And
nice
then
of you, by the
when I
way.
was,
That's very nice of you.
yeah,
That's
well,
rare.
we
That's
kind of
rare. I'm
keep,
telling you, that's rare when a man is supporting his wife that
well, we
much.
take
That's very rare, and
kind of take
that's very
turns.
nice of you.
Yeah, well, we take turns. I mean, this has kind of been. I mean, we're celebrating our 50th wedding anniversary in
Nice.
August.
Congratulations for that.
So yeah, we have kind of not planning. Okay, it's my turn now. It's your turn. it's like, when I was working on Return to Monkey Island, it was pretty intense, and she jumped in and took over a lot of the household stuff that I would usually help with in a way which made it easier for me to do my game. So, you know, for that was, and we were very lucky with that project. I know we're lucky if it was planned, but it was definitely planned by Ron to not burn us out by having us put in more hours than we were supposed to. So it was, it was kind of like the 40-hour week. But it was a very intense 40-hour week. It wasn't like, do a little coding here, do a little internet, surfing, browsing stuff and going back. It was like, focused on the game during those hours. And during those hours, I could take a break, but Annie was super supportive in helping me complete it and bounced ideas off of. And, she was one of the few people that really the only person for a long time that knew about the game. It was okay for us to talk to our spouses or our partners. Um, so that was, and so I feel like now I'm giving back to her. And it's not like I owe you this. It's just like, oh, this is the thing. This is the next thing. And I have skills that you needed to get your
This is the
new
right thing to do,
website up.
right?
Yeah, website, social media, formatting the book, doing, creating the PDFs and uploading them to Amazon and to other, the other place where we have it published through and through Ingram. And it's, it, I, I love doing that. We after our call, we have a call with her marketing team to kind of go to the next stage with that. So we're in it together as partners, and it's kind of like how our relationship has been. And in Zach, I named one of the main characters after her. Annie Laris was my wife's maiden name, so that was clearly kind of a call out to her. Her as a strong character. So long time partnership.
Why do you think that most people cannot make such close relationships with their loved ones? What could be the
Um,
case behind that?
yeah, well, there's got to be some area of luck in there,
Okay.
that you find the person, but then you find the person who has similar goals in terms of growing and changing and communicating. And it was hard. It took work. It wasn't like you pop in the relationship and everything is right. There's lots of give and take. There's lots of difficult discussions more early on when you're kind of deciding what our life is going to look like, and really seeing it as equal partnership as opposed to like, or equal, but also maybe, like I said, like having someone supporting the other, then switch. Now I'm supporting her, now she's supporting me, and kind of
Like in Theme
switching
Park,
roles.
the rides, right? So it's it's very similar.
Yeah,
Everything goes back
yeah.
to the childhood and the theme park. It's so nice to see that and hear that. Yeah.
I think it needs to be fluid, and then reinventing our relationship or our interests or supporting each other in our interests. And um, I mean, one of the first things we did, which is kind of funny, is like way back right after we got married, a year or two in, we actually were giving relationship workshops together, where people would come in and we'd go through different exercises and do things. And it's like, wow, I guess we thought we knew enough about relationships to actually help other people, even back in our early years. So,
People need that. I
um,
agree with that. Yeah. Most
yeah,
people need
I,
that.
I,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm kind of surprised that people believed us, since here we are maybe 2 or 3 years into our own relationship. It wasn't like we had been together for decades at that point.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe we helped someone back then.
Hopefully, and I'm sure too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you believe that also having your childhood in your inner self, and that probably your wife had her childhood as well, uh, forever?
I
Do
mean,
you think those things also helped you?
yeah. Are you talking about like keeping your inner child,
Yeah,
or are you
yeah,
talking about your background?
yeah. Also,
Yeah.
like not forgetting that. where you came from, and also like being a child as an adult. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's, if you lose that, it's hard to get it back. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe something can change, and we could be inspired to try the thing you've been dreaming of in some way without, you know, if you do it incrementally, maybe at least until you feel like, yeah, this is working. I got to do this. So
I see. And so, like, all of us have like bad times during our lives. So how did you manage to keep your inner child during those times? Like what have kept you be motivated and not to lose your inner child? Because as for my example, I remember that it will be a personal example from me, because I appreciate that you opened up so much, and I will also tell you an example from my life. So when I lost my grandfather when I was 12, I felt like I'm losing my childhood as well, and I tried to secure it over the years, and I'm very happy that I could secure it, and for me, I secured it with games and also giving love to the people and helping people just like you did, and so yeah, I feel like in every moment of my life when I was down, my grandfather and my childhood always reminded me to be myself and remember the good times when I was a kid, playing with them and playing with my good friends, and believing in aliens also, and yeah. So what helped you be motivated throughout your
I,
journey
I
as a
think I
person?
think there were people in my life when I was a kid. There were people in my life who stepped up and
Okay.
were there for me to talk to.
Okay.
So when my mother was ill and my father wasn't especially helpful, but my step grandmother was great, and she stepped up and we could talk to her and she understood. And remember, she and my grandfather, my mother's father, took us on a long trip to San Francisco, and me and my brother and sister, and just getting away from it and having some sense of normalcy and excitement along with the things that weren't so nice. Then later there was my father remarried, and my stepmother was also very intuitive and great person to talk to. So having people who could bring it out and help me with that. And then I did my own series of self discovery when I was doing during college and other things where I was looking for other answers and alternate ideas, and got very involved in a few things that I felt gave me some tools to deal with issues and relationship stuff and personal issues, and just gave me that tool set so I could not only do better but also help other people. I mean, there was a couple of years where I was actually counseling with other people before I started doing the computer stuff, and helping people came to my house and we'd have sessions and talk about things, and that was always a part of it. So I feel like, in fact, when I first started doing the computer stuff, the computer center and then eventually games, the idea was like, is there a way to take the things I'm doing in sessions with people and embed them in games in a way where many more people could have realizations or alternate realities, or open up their view of the universe in some way. Um, and that, again, that's probably Zach is probably the closest to that in terms of the stuff I had worked on.
Nice.
So yeah, I think the answer is yes.
Okay, thank
You
you.
could do
And
it.
that's very nice to hear, because it's very interesting also to see that people who like had some real life issues, they are the ones who are mostly willing to help others, because they learn to deal with these issues, and also, like we were discussing it earlier, they're willing to secure their inner child, and these are very nice stories, and also like very sad in a way, but very nice. So it's like a symbolic or symbol of uh I would say, like the clown who is like crying with his one eye and he's smiling. There is symbol for
Mm.
that. It's
Yeah.
like very very natural and very nice as well. When you also you hear a sad song, but you're still like, feel something warm in your heart. It's something similar to
Yeah.
that.
So, so I'm thinking about people who don't have anyone in their family who they could go to when they have issues, like, things that where they don't have the support either with a sibling or with a parent or a grandparent or
It will be very
something.
hard for them.
It's much harder. So I
Yeah,
guess the thing is that the message is to find that person or those people.
true, true.
Um, and if you can't find them in your family, then the whole idea, there's a whole trope in literature and fiction of found families where you don't you come up with a terrible family, and you leave and you find a new family of friends and people who actually can support you the way you need, and they become your family.
Yeah, but I feel like
And
I feel like as I talk to a lot of people about this, and I feel like most people do not realize that their original family will, so the love that they will or would get from their original family will never be the same like from getting it from other people, in my opinion. Because I feel like, so that's the case. I talk to a lot of people who, for example, lost their parents, and they become like the person who tries to, regain that love from relationships, like for example, to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, but they never manage to get that much love from out of their relationship. And I think that's because, like, of course you cannot compare the love of a mother or love of a girlfriend or a wife, in my opinion. And of course it's not for the case for the all examples, but mostly it won't happen. And I think that's why people suffer so much, because they're trying to like find the love that they could not get from their parents in, friendships or other closer relationships, like, having a wife or a boyfriend or a girlfriend.
right, well, or the idea that someone who had a crappy father, a woman who has a bad father, ends up marrying someone to replace that father.
Yeah, true,
That
true.
that's probably
They
that.
always end up by having a person who was very similar to their father, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, that probably doesn't
Unfortunately,
work.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's because the person hasn't resolved the issues with the with their
True,
parent.
true.
Um, so it's kind of like you can't marry the person who to take the place of the bad parent kind of thing.
Yeah,
So you have to kind of fix that first in your
yeah,
therapy or whatever, talk
yeah,
therapy or whatever
totally.
it is you need to
Yeah,
do. Um,
yeah. People are
so
are
you're not
are very much into like running away from their problems and past, and that's what I always say. And I feel like that people in fact do not want to leave their past behind. They're just saying that, okay, let's leave it behind there, let's put it under the table or something like that. And I feel like most of us, even none of us, are not doing that. In fact, it's just they are trying to hide it, from themselves, but in fact the past is always coming back, in some way. And I feel like that should be a change about humans as whole, because like I feel like you also said, and I'm totally agreeing with you on that people should not just learn from their past, but also like have their past in some way with their life going on. uh, for example, like you mentioned before, being able to fix their problems that they had with their parents. So yeah.
yeah. I'm curious whether there are um, I mean, we're totally off topic from games at this point, which is okay.
I hope that you're not like mad at me or anything, that I'm going to be
No,
into much
it's good. I'm
so
just
much personal, because
I'm,
so my dev life show is more about like not just the games, but the person himself, and the message that he's willing to give. Because I feel like, don't get me wrong, and it will be a harsh statement from me, but a lot of people who are making these interviews with anyone, not just developers, but these interview shows, they are more into, boring facts, which also interesting, because like of course it's interesting to know about the game, but for me, I always say that I'm passionate not just with the games itself, but also the people who are making these games. And it's so nice to hear from you that you're a person who are willing to help people with games, because it's rare. So it's not like an everyday thing, that's okay, let's make games to help people. It's not an everyday thing. It's not that all of the people are making games to give messages. I believe in one thing. I believe that everyone has a message with their game, even if they are working in a company with 100 people or 1000 people, even if they are solo developing a game. But not all of them are intentionally having their message to be given for the players. And that's the nice thing about it, that with these dev life episodes of mine, I'm always saying it's like a therapy, not just for myself but the other person, my guests as well, because we also like learn about ourselves. And I also, like I said, I totally appreciate that you're being honest with me and with the audience as well, and telling your stories, because it's
Well,
important for me. I still believe, like a naive kid, in that we can change the world for the better. I know it's hard. I struggle with that too. I can tell you that, but yeah, it can be solved if more people would be involved with that, and hopefully these episodes and this episode as well, with speaking with you, will help people change for the better. Yeah,
I'm curious whether there anyone who has questions
yeah. Let
to
us know.
ask
Let
me.
us know. I will also have some questions, by the way, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Yeah, let us know. Let us know. Yeah, let us know. Let us know, everyone, if there is any question. Let us
I'm
know.
looking into the chat stream.
Hölgyek, urak, hogyha bármi kérdés van, nyugodtan kérdezetek egyébként. Nyugodtan kérdezetek. Let us know if you have any questions. I know most of you all are lurkers around this time because it's late at my place, but yeah, let me know. Let me know. Let me
What
know.
time is it there?
It's
Is it?
7.
Are
It's
you
7 p.m. It's 7 p.m. But
okay?
usually people around this time are mostly lurking. They're getting out from their job, going home, showering. So lurkers. I always make this joke that lurkers speak up. Hölgyek, urak, hogyha bármi kérdés van, tényleg kérdeztek. The question is, I wanted to ask you, so how did you get into gaming? As we mentioned, childhood. It's also important to know, in my opinion. How did you
Yeah.
get into gaming?
Well, there weren't computer games when I was a kid.
Okay.
Um, so because there weren't personal computers, there weren't arcade. There were arcades, but they were coin-op arcades, but they were all mechanical devices. So pinball, which I never really got into, I was never good at that. They had some mechanical shooting type
I
things,
see.
where you'd have like trying to blow up a battleship, and you'd see like a light would be mechanically pull the trigger, and you'd see a light that represented the torpedo that would go off, and something would hit or not hit. So I remember liking those a lot as a kid. There was when I was at college, there was a field trip we took to Stanford Research Institute in 1971, and one of the things they showed us was a CRT, it's a dumb terminal connected to a mini computer someplace, and they had the game Space Wars playing on it. And you can control use the keyboard for left, right, turn left, move right, and you can see your little triangle, which was you moving around the area and having to shoot other ships. And it was the first time I ever saw a computer game on a screen that was interactive, and a light bulb just went off. Like, it's like, oh wow, this is amazing. And this is before it became a few years later, there were versions that were, I think, I don't know if Atari, who did that. There was a coin op, I guess, game that used the same thing, but in a standalone cabinet that came out a few years later. But the idea of like, okay, this is really cool. So, but I was doing psychology then, but that idea kind of stuck there. Like, wow, this might be a really cool thing in the future. And
I
then
see.
by the time we were starting to do the computer center, but then the arcades have, got, um, way more interactive. And we were thinking first, should we try to open an arcade? And that didn't feel like the right direction. So that's where we ended up doing the computer center. And because we were a nonprofit, a lot of the publishers at the time were willing to donate games to us. And we would have the kids who came to our center, and they would come to the center. Some volunteered, some would rent time on the computers for like $1.50 an hour, and play games that you load into the microcomputers we had. And we'd have them review the games that we got from publishers, and those reviews would end up in, say, Creative Computing magazine to talk about why this game was good or bad, what we liked about the game. And so I was very interested in the games primarily because they were what we were having kids play with, and then I got to do some, there was a company called Adventure International, Scott Adams, who had these text adventures, and he wrote them originally for the Radio Shack, the TRS-80 computer, and we offered to port them to the Apple II and to, I guess, CPM type machines, 8080 systems that use a CPM operating system. And so I got to look at his code, and they were all written in BASIC programming language. So we had to, the TRS-80 version of Microsoft BASIC had a lot more commands available than the AppleSoft version that was in the Apple II. For example, searching text in a string or using if then else. There was no if then else in AppleSoft.
Oh, really?
So
They did not have that?
yeah, no.
Okay.
So we had a one of our members, young guy who was great at assembly programming, which I didn't know at the time. We ended up creating a add-on tool set for AppleSoft that kind of gave us these commands that we were missing.
I see.
And by doing that, I was able to port the games much more easily without having to rewrite them. Just kind of the equivalent of if then else, equivalent of string search. There are probably 2 or 3 other commands that we added that made it easier to do those ports. And then we sold that as a product through Adventure International. It's something called Apple Spice, which was like a disk you'd buy to add on additional features, and Adventure International sold those for us. And but by going into his code and looking at it, that was how I learned how to do games. It was by following his logic, understanding it, looking for I found a couple of bugs that I could correct, and then we would get a royalty share for the port. And it was like, okay, this is really fun. I could do this. So I don't know that I was ever a huge gamer. For me, it always had an element of learning new stuff as opposed to being entertained. And because it was hard to play a game without having my designer hat on, thinking, how would I do this differently? That was a stupid choice that they did. Why did they do it that way? I would have done it like this. So
were you too judgy? Were you too judgy about games as a developer?
It was judgy. Yeah, it kind of kept me removed from being immersed in the game. There are a few games that pulled me in all the way, where I felt like, oh, this is great. But it often I would be, I give up on the game early because I just frustrated me that the developer did it a certain way that it was so obviously wrong. I couldn't go with it. That might be why I never got into the Sierra Online games, because I always felt that they were way too arbitrary in how they dealt death, and how they blocked your progress. And we had some of those at our center, at the computer center, some of the early adventures where it was basically a text parser with, like vector drawn images in different rooms. So there was no animation; it was just showing the scene essentially. That was the early version of graphic adventures, and I think they weren't as bad then. But I think later on, when you actually started moving the characters around on the screen, then it was. How often could we kill you that you'd have to go back and try something different? And that was clearly a different approach that we took at Lucas to not make it very hard to die, really, if you had to die, and eventually that you couldn't die. You didn't have to worry about, unless you worked really, really hard at like, if you knew that Guybrush could only hold his breath for 10 minutes and you decided to stick him underwater for 20 or 30 minutes, and that was clearly someone pushing the envelope of the universe we set up, and we let them die at that point.
I'm correct. Back then, as for adventure games, developers made these death animations and options since it was also like a core part of the game, if I'm correct, right? So some developers made that intentionally.
I think the feeling that I didn't like.
I'm not saying it was good or bad. I'm just saying that it was on their intention to do that.
Yeah, I think doing a death.
It was like a collectible thing, back then for games.
Okay, yeah. The feeling I had was I was in opposition that the developer was the antagonist, that they were the ones trying to get me, trying to stop my progress. And the games that we did I felt were more like, we're going to put some barriers, but we want you to solve them, and we're going to help you solve them, and we want to give you, if it's taking you too long, we might give you additional hints, or we might do this, but we don't want to kill you off without it being clearly like, jumping out of an airplane without a parachute. Probably not a good idea. And that would be, but you might try it to see what happens, but it's not arbitrary. It's like, okay. I feel like there's a scene in Thimbleweed Park that I wrote where Dolores, one of the characters in her flashback introduction sequence, I think she opens up the refrigerator and sees a bottle of broken glass and ketchup, which is a direct reference to the same thing in Maniac Mansion. And I have her turn to the camera and gives this whole speech about, if this were a Sierra Online game, I would be dead now because I just touched, broken glass. And it's like, her kind of, me, obviously it was me through her kind of complaining about that kind of gameplay.
Do you think that they get it, or they played the game and they get it, or got it?
Well, yeah, it was an in joke essentially, because you'd have to have played those games, but
true.
That the timing of when that was when those were the games that were out. Thimbleweed Park took place in 1988, 1989, forgot which, I think 89, which is around that period. So anyway, that was a pet peeve of mine, and I think that was something that we were striving for, of giving you enough forward progress experience in the games that you weren't getting frustrated and didn't feel like you were fighting against the developer or the designer. It's like, in my mind, I could picture these, designers sitting in a room brainstorming different ways to kill you off. It just took me out of the experience of being in the game when I imagined that, and it's okay. This, it broke the story essentially
Yeah.
for me.
I totally agree with you on that, but I also feel like people are like a lot of people are like, since they are looking for new experiences in games, and they did as well in the old school era of adventure games. I think that that was the case why some developers had these choices to, make these collectible death sequences, because a lot of people like very much into like seeing another person die. I know it's weird to say. I'm not like that, but I have friends who are, watching horror movies and somebody's, killing another person. They are just eating popcorn and so hyped about it, and I was like, what the hell? Why are you so hyped about it? And a lot of people are like that. I'm not saying they are crazy about it, so I'm not saying it's bad, but for me it's very interesting and very weird to experience that. So yeah, I totally agree with you on that topic. Yeah. Okay, so what do you think? What's made adventure games, and what makes adventure games that special? What's the perfect, or what's the recipe that is being made by the developers that so much people love these adventure games, just like me, just like you, and a lot of people
Yeah.
love
Well,
those
I feel
games.
like working on Return to Monkey Island was kind of a master class, even though I've done adventure games before, but working with Dave and Ron, I wasn't a designer on that game. I was lead game programmer, so I
Yeah.
was implementing most of their ideas. I mean, come up with ideas too, but most of the puzzles were already worked out. And in that universe, in that game, I mean, clearly we were going for a combination of comedy and adventure and puzzles that were fun to solve, that were clever, and that we kind of lead you in the right direction, but then add layers of. I mean, you know what you have to do. Excuse me.
That's fine.
But you would have a bunch of intermediate steps you didn't know about until you get to the final result. So you knew where you were going. Um, but we also tried a bunch of stuff there, which I thought was really great. Having the in-game hint book, so you didn't have to go out to the internet to find someone's walkthrough, which is probably going to spoil a bunch of stuff. It may even be for the wrong mode, like if you were playing easy mode versus hard mode. Excuse me, the
It's okay.
walkthrough might have been for the wrong mode. So having it there meant that you could choose the level of hint you wanted. They were, you know, graduated or incremental hints where you get the first level and then go for the next if you need more. Um, but also um, having a to-do list that we kept so that if you forgot what you were working on or what puzzle was, you could focus on, or if you got stuck on the one you have, you can look at the other items that were on your list. And the to-do list comes from talking to characters and saying, well, you need to get this, right? Oh, I need to do that. And that was fun. And then also I thought this is really cool. I never actually did this, got the experiences directly, but the idea that if you put the game aside for a period of like a few days and you come back in, it would give you like a refresher of where we were in the story, and kind of give you an update of like
It's like an episodic, right?
yeah.
Feeling. Yeah.
And kind of like when you on TV shows where you get like what happened last week, or where are we today, to kind of refresh where you were to get you back into the game.
I
So
see.
those were really good. Um, a lot of there had to be. I mean, the goal was always to let the player. We wanted the player to have that aha moment when things kind of come together, and that's kind of, for me, that was the golden prize that we were always going for. So making sure that you weren't trying to avoid getting stuff before you really needed it or knew what it was for. Like, don't go to this location yet because it's going to give something away. You're going to get distracted. I remember doing play tests for Thimbleby Park. My wife Annie did a play test, and in the very beginning of the game, you're walking from the stream under the bridge area down this long street, and then into the town. And on the way, there's a cemetery, and we really didn't want you to go to the cemetery yet because it was totally off purpose. We wanted to get you into the town to get information about the story and what you had to do. And she walked into this cemetery and spent like 15 minutes wandering around there when there really was nothing to do yet. And so it's okay, from the play testing, realized, well, that was, she got bored because there was nothing to discover that was relevant yet. So we changed the game so that you could see it, and the character would say, no, I really need to get into town and talk to the sheriff or something. And so, like, kind of not quite kind of putting you on a track, but kind of directing you subtly in a place where you needed to go to
it's
not
the same compass that you were talking about your life, right? Same mentality,
yeah,
we could say,
yeah.
Same
and then there's a place I can go to later, but you don't need to go there yet. So adding some guide rails, essentially, or to kind of let it be interactive, but not until you've experienced something you needed to do. And then as the game goes, it opens up more like this. But initially, keeping it more limited so you're not spending a lot of time exploring areas before you know what you're actually, what the goal is, what you're trying to figure out.
I see.
That was kind of learning more about how the science of creating adventure games had advanced over the decades, and that was really fun to work on that project because of that.
I see. You were talking about also that people are spoiling games for themselves. Do you believe without the internet or without all these walkthroughs and streams, YouTube videos, more people would play through all the story-oriented games?
Yeah, well, that was actually something we talked a lot about, was like, how do back when we did adventure games in the 80s and 90s, there was no Twitch. And the idea that someone could buy the game and play it, do the walkthrough, or play it through and have people watch, and would you really then go and buy the game yourself?
Yeah.
In the case of a shooting game, yeah, because there's a bunch of stuff, you're learning a skill, you're trying things and doing things differently. But in an adventure game, it's kind of like once you learn the puzzle, you're spoiled for that.
Yeah.
And I understand if you never would buy it, that would be good. But if anything about it is interesting, then you're kind of, it's like having a friend tell you the plot of a movie right before you're going to go see it. You already know what's happening now. And in the adventure game, if most of the fun is the exploration and discovery and figuring stuff out, then having someone else do that for you means you're not ever in the game doing it for yourself.
Sure.
So it wasn't something we would stop, but I feel sorry for those people who had the game spoiled and went off and played it and didn't get the full experience. I mean, there's always stuff there were so many things in the games we did that you could always go back and find a bunch of new things that you hadn't noticed the first time.
And also everyone can take the message with a different, realization if
Yeah.
they
Well,
play
I
through
mean,
by themselves.
I think we ended up. I think there was after I left the project, I think there was a feature that Apple had for iOS where you could play the game. You could download the game. Maybe you could download the game for free or something, or get a certain amount of free play time, and then choose to buy it or not. And I think we kept you um, on the first island, so you really couldn't get beyond a certain point in the game, and then that would trigger it. Um, and that would give you kind of like as a demo, you know. So it kind of treats part of the game as a demo, and then you could buy and expand to the rest of the game. I think that was good.
Yeah.
But so maybe if Twitch people playing adventure games would limit it to the first part, then that would be, let people go off
Or
and
at
do it
least just one
themselves.
hour, yeah. Or something like that,
Yeah,
yeah.
but you know that wasn't something we would control anyway. So it was just a personal thing. Would I watch someone? I don't think I would watch someone play a game I wasn't planning to play for that reason.
Yeah, I agree
That
with you
if
on
I,
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I always tell my viewers to try out the games for themselves. Just watch, some minutes and try the games outside for themselves. I rather, like to stream, like you said, multiplayer games that we can play together. I also like to stream story games, but there are like games, also adventure games, we could say, which are, like choice based stories, like Quantic Dream developers had these choice-based stories, and Telltale as well. And it's very nice that there is an option for like streamers, that the crowd can decide on the choices. So they are
yeah,
like put together in one community with the streamer, and they can relive the story with the streamer as they would play. So I think that they were
yeah.
thinking for that thing. So people are,
Well, if the streamer was, rather than saying I'm going to try this, asking the people
yeah,
who are
exactly, yeah,
in the room, say what do you think I should do? What should we try next?
yeah,
And let people, then it's a group experience of people
yeah,
solving. And I've had that experience of playing adventure games with other people and brainstorming solutions or coming up with, oh, I know what to do. Let's try this, and that's actually fun. So if you have a group of 50 people who are playing it with you or whatever, um, that could work out pretty well
yeah.
as
And
long
it's
as you're
also
doing it
nice to
together.
see that different people have different reactions, to the story, and it's also like another perspective of having fun, as a group. So I think that there's a good part of it, and there is also, like you were telling us, that there's also a bad part, and I feel like it's very bad to see that a lot of people, since they can watch these videos about games, they are not willing to try them out. And I was reading an article from Amy Hennig, the story writer, author of Uncharted games, and she had um, this sentence about like she's very sad since only the 30 or 25% of the players who bought Uncharted trilogy only played through her game. And yeah, it's very sad that people are like not into the stories. But I believe I had a discussion with a lot of people about it. I believe also could be the case behind that fact that people are not having localized games. For example, in my country, a lot of games are not localized to Hungarian language, so people are not, since they are not willing to learn, for example, English or other languages that good, they might not go into very deep into a story-oriented game since they are
Mhm.
afraid that they won't understand. And of course, not a lot of people are brave enough, to use Google Translate or learn it on the way, because it will take away from their experience. So I think that that could be also the case behind this fact. So yeah, okay.
Yeah,
And what was your very favorite part to work on games throughout your journey as a developer?
all the games I've
All the
worked on.
games, yeah, all the games.
Okay,
You told
so the
us
thing that
the
first,
favorite game that you have been working on, but what was your
yeah,
favorite part of working?
there's this, in the part of the process. There's this point in developing a game where enough of it is working,
Okay.
where you actually are playing the game. And for me, I've had this happen multiple times where there's this magical moment feeling like, wow, this is, I helped create, or I created or helped create this universe, and I could actually explore it now, or actually go into it. And it was like this jolt of, almost a jolt of electricity of like, um, having created something that you can then experience directly. And then it just gets better because you're adding more and more polish. But it was like from the place where it doesn't exist to all of a sudden, I can now move around this world and get a sense of the scope of the universe, and it's starting to come to life. And, um, in VR, I think the idea of presence, that all of a sudden you feel like you're actually there, is similar to that, where something just switches. But because it was your creation, maybe that makes it especially special. I think I remember that on the first game I worked on at Lucas, which was Rescue on Fractalus, of flying around and having this kind of like this chill, almost like of energy coming in when I realized I was actually playing the game and flying around this universe, and it was fun, and that's very magical, and that may only happen once in a game for me, because it was from it not being anything to it being there, and so nothing. I don't know what it is that triggers that. How much of the game has to be there for that to happen. But I've talked to other developers who've had that same experience.
I see.
um, another part is just watching someone play it. Combination of total frustration and also really a lot of fun.
Can you get very
I
emotional if somebody does not like your game that much that you have been working on?
um, no, it's not as much that, because during at that point it's really we're watching them to learn what we need to do
I see.
differently.
Okay.
But it's more um, like in a play test, you're not supposed to say or do anything to help them, and the the frustration I would feel of, this is not a good thing, I guess, but the frustration I feel of like watching them struggling around a specific problem, when of course in my mind I know what the solution is. It's so obvious, but I have to sit on my hands. I
You
can't
cannot
point, I can't
help
talk.
them.
I can't help them because I want to watch how hard it is for them to suffer through it, to
You are
do
the
it.
evil who
And
are
that
not helping them, right? No, I'm just
it's
joking.
totally against, I'm a helper. It's against my nature to
I'm
not
just
jump
joking. I'm
in.
just joking.
Yeah. Right. Um, I it's like, because that's so ingrained in how I approach things, to not be able to do that made it really hard to watch people doing that. That's not really answering your question. I guess on the other hand, watching someone and seeing them have that aha moment when it all comes together is really fun. See that they figured it out.
I see. Okay. Nice. And, you were also talking about like different worlds, different universes, building them and believing in them. So, what do you think about the case that all these makers of these famous movies like Star Wars and Star Trek? So these people like had the visions for our future life. So, do you believe that people who had these crazy ideas and have these crazy ideas that they make it happen as a form of art, for example, as games, as movies and books, do you believe that they have this common knowledge of our past life or future life, and that's why they are bringing it to the table, and they want to comfort us with that knowledge? Okay, prepare for that, it will happen sometime.
Um, Maybe, I don't know how many are aware of it, or they just feel driven to tell their story.
Okay.
I'm I find it fascinating watching documentaries on creative people who there's a wonderful one on on Jim Henson on the Disney Plus channel right now. There's one on George Lucas on probably on the same channel. Finding someone who um, created some really amazing things, and then watching the process, how driven they might have been to get it done, and how exacting, and just recognizing some parts myself or not, and just saying, well, okay, things that I really admire, um, their work, and got I the Jim Henson one was especially fun because um, I got to meet him when we were doing Labyrinth, and he was the director on that movie. And um, when we were in the early stages of, before we even designed it, a group of us from Lucasfilm Games went to England and spent like 5 days brainstorming with Douglas Adams from Hitchhiker's Guide fame, and he was close friends with Jim, so he wasn't really on the movie, but he was. I guess I'm not sure. He must have. What was the connection? Christopher Surf came with us. Chris was one of the early people at Sesame Street, and also worked with Jim Henson. So it was like this group of these friends who kind of helped each other with their projects. Um, and there was a dinner that Douglas Adams had at his house, where he and his partner cooked dinner for everyone. And I think there was maybe, and Jim Henson came to the dinner, and Jim was sitting across the table from me, and I'd be eating, and I'm totally intimidated because, like, here these are two famous guys, Douglas Adams and Jim Henson. Douglas over here, Jim over here. Every once in a while, I'd be eating and I hear Kermit the Frog talking, and I kind of pick up my head and say, "Oh, right, it's Jim." I mean, it's like his voice and Kermit's were so close that, or Ernie. It's like it was kind of like this total break in reality. Like it was like, whoa, that's Jim right there. So watching this documentary and kind of pinpointing that point in the film where I had met him when he was working on Labyrinth, and hearing some of the backstory on that movie, and that was really fun. So kind of learning about what drives creative people to make the amazing things that they've made is always fascinating to see. What people that I look up to and think are way beyond me in terms of what they've created.
But you're also a very talented person by
So
helping
thanks.
people and with giving out your message and your stories, and I appreciate that so much because, like I said in the earlier stages of our interview, it's very important these days, and I know not everyone realizes it that it's important, but I hope there will be a change when and people will realize it. And yeah, okay, so yeah, by the way, I think that we might had a question. I'm not sure. Oh no. Yeah, people are still lurking. If there is a question, let us know. Let us know. Let us know.
Yeah, well, I probably going to need to wrap up soon.
Okay.
I haven't had breakfast, and
Okay.
we're meeting with
Will you
Chinese
have
marketing
like 2 or
people.
3 minutes for me after our stream?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Okay. Thank
But
you for
so
that.
so if there are any people who are lurking and have any questions, um, now is your chance.
Yeah. Let us know. Let us know. Yeah. 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 Hölgyek,
I mean, you
urak,
can
hogyha
reach me on.
bármi. Sorry. Sorry.
I say you can reach me on social media also. Um,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not
By the way, I'm
too
planning to
active.
add you also to my Discord channel if it's okay to you. Okay, and people can ask you there if
Yeah.
they want. If you're down to that.
I I'm probably most reachable on probably right now on Threads.
Okay.
In terms of being able to just ask stuff.
Okay.
Also, I do check in on Twitter, but not as often as I used to. Um, Instagram. I'm on TikTok now
Nice.
because that's really where Annie's book audience is really on TikTok and Instagram. It's Book Talk,
Book talk.
which is a subset of the TikTok community, and
That's an example that
Bookstagram,
people can use TikTok for right reasons, right?
right?
Yeah.
Um, and also I'm on what is it? Um, yeah, I mean, my username is usually David B. Fox, so it's pretty much the same on everything. Um, also on Mastodon, um, so you could find me out in public.
Thank you for that. Okay, I think that we can call it an end here then. And like I
Okay,
said,
so no questions.
I really appreciate
No
your
questions
time.
for me.
Sorry?
Yeah, because no one asked. No one had any questions.
No, because like I said, people are lurking, and usually like around this time they are like doing their chores. Yeah, it's late here. It's like almost 8 p.m. But like I said, people are always like asking for my community at least after the stream. So most of them are like shy to speak in English because they are mostly Hungarians. But I do have some English speaking people in my community as well. So yeah, I will let you know, and you will also see it in my Discord as well. So yeah, thank you everyone who joined us for today's interview with David here. And I'm, like I said, I'm very honored and thankful that you joined us today. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And yeah,
Yeah, thank you for your great questions too.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.